The Princess of the Chalet School by Eleanor M. Brent Dreyer, the third book in the series. Chapter 1. A Weary Patient. Into the pretty bedroom came the great English doctor, a jolly smile on his face as he approached the bed where his patient was lying. "Good morning, Your Highness. How are you this morning?" he cried. The little girl on the bed looked at him wearily. "I'm getting better, thank you," she replied in a listless tone which made the doctor frown. The younger man who had entered the room with him bent over the child. "Still rather tired, my darling?" he asked tenderly. "Just a little, Daddy." "It's the dreadful weather," he said, looking out of the window at the rain which poured steadily down. "When it's fine again, you shall be all right." "Shall I?" Her Royal Highness the Princess Elisaveta Margarita of Belsornia looked at her father with a little wondering smile. "Why, yes. That is what the good Dr. Tracy says." The doctor nodded at the great dark eyes were turned on him. "Yes, indeed, Highness, it is true. And how would you like to get up for a little while this afternoon?" The princess shook her head. "I'm so tired," she said. "I don't think I shall ever want to get up again." "Nonsense," declared the physician. "You shall get up for a short while, and I expect you will soon be making an outcry if I suggest keeping you in bed an hour longer than need be." He made a short examination of her and then stood back, still frowning slightly. The Crown Prince of Belsornia glanced at him. "Will that be all at present, sir?" he asked in his pleasant voice. "All I want just now, thank you," replied the doctor. "I will come in this afternoon after Her Highness has got up, and see how she feels." He smiled at the little girl. "I am sure she will feel much better soon." He stepped back from the bed, and the Crown Prince took his place. "I must leave you now, Karina. There is a meeting of the Grand Council, and they need me. I will try to come back and have tea with you this afternoon, though. So you must be sitting up and ready to pour out for me." Elisaveta nodded. "Yes, I will. You will come, Daddy, won't you?" "If that's all possible. If the welfare of the kingdom doesn't require my immediate attention. You'll be good old lady and eat all your luncheon." "Yes, Daddy, at least I'll try," promised the princess. "I do hope the kingdom won't need you, and it's so lonely here by myself." "Oh, come. You have Nurse and Alette, to say nothing of Mademoiselle." "I know, but they don't play with me as you do." "So you'll come, Daddy? And you come too, Doctor," she added politely. "Perhaps," laughed the doctor. "If I am not wanted at the hospital, I will come with pleasure." They said good-bye to her, and then they went out of the room, and the Crown Prince turned back to throw kisses to her as she lay on her big pillows. Once they were out of hearing, however, he caught the doctor by the arm. "Tracy, come into my library a minute. I must know what you think of Elisaveta. I am horribly worried about her. She seems so listless and weak. She always was such a jolly child. It isn't at all like her to be so languid." They entered the great library as he finished speaking and sat down beside the blazing wood fire. The doctor looked at the prince for a moment before he replied. "It would not be fair to you, Prince, to hide from you what I am anxious about the princess's slow recovery," he said at length. "Of course, bronchial influenza is a nasty thing, and the princess has had a sharp attack. Still, she ought to be picking up now. The worrying thing is that she is making little or no headway. I think she needs rousing. That's why I am so determined that she shall get up, if only for a short while this afternoon. I was thankful that you backed me up in that." "Well, I could do no less. But tell me, Tracy, is there anything I can do to help matters on? I'll do anything I can." "So far as I can see, The only thing you could do would be to give up your position as crown prince and settle down as an ordinary man, said the doctor dryly. Her Royal Highness is suffering mainly from a lack of suitable companions, and you're the only one she can have, and she gets very little of you. The prince threw out his hands with a gesture of despair. That's all very well, but what can I do? I'd willingly give up my claim to the throne, but my father would never hear of it, and you know that in Belsornia the heir cannot give up his rights without the consent of the king and the government. The next after me is my cousin, Cosimo, and he is not exactly the type of heir of whom one can be proud. He isn't, agreed the doctor, his mind going to some of the escapades which had made Prince Cosimo one of the most hated royals of the continent. Well then, suggest something possible. The doctor thought again. There could never be any question of Princess Elisaveta succeeding to the throne? He queried. None. The Salic law holds good here. I believe the Belsornians would rather become a republic than have a woman on the throne. Then why not send her to school? The prince raised his eyebrows. To school? I don't know what the king would say to that. It's never been done in our family. Not for the girls, of course. I had a year at Eton and 2 at Oxford, but that was only thanks to my mother. She was English, you know, and she persuaded my father to agree to it. But for a girl, I don't know if they would consent. Where would you suggest sending her? Not to England. I love my country, but not her climate, and the English winters with the heavy fogs would be the last thing for the princess. No, what I have in mind is something far better than that. I have a friend who has just sent his daughter to a school in the Austrian Tyrol. It is quite a big school, I'm told, run by an English girl. It is up in the mountains beside the Tarnsee, and is just the very thing we need, if His Majesty will give his consent. The Tarnsee, I went there once, when I was on my honeymoon. I remember it well. It was very beautiful, and the ringed round with mountains. So there is a school there now, and a good school? Very. I am sure of that. Or my friend would never have sent his child there. She is only a child and motherless. Like my poor little Elisaveta. I believe you are right, Tracy. If she had companions, I think she would soon be all right. I am sure of it, said the physician with conviction. Then he suddenly let himself go. For heaven's sake, Prince, can't you see that all the court ceremony and restrictions are simply sucking the child's vitality away? She has no chance to be a child. What has a baby of 12 to do with the welfare of the kingdom? She ought to be climbing trees and sliding down the banisters, not troubling herself with meeting of the Grand Council. I'd rather see the princess black with mud and wearing a badly torn frock than in her prettiest robes and helping to receive royalty like a young queen. The one's natural childhood, the other isn't. I agree, said her father. You're right. If words can do it, my father shall consent to it tonight. After all, the child is mine, and she shall not die for lack of what the poorest child in the kingdom has. If he won't agree, she shall be smuggled out of the country somehow. There's my hand on it. He held out his hand, and the doctor gripped it. I wish you success with His Majesty. With all my heart, Prince. I think perhaps he may agree. Then the 2 men went on their way, and the prince to a meeting of the Grand Council, where he was to represent his father, and the doctor to the Children's Hospital, where he was doing such grand works for Belsornia. In the meantime, the princess, never dreaming of what was happening, had fallen into her favorite daydream, and was arriving at school, where there were lots of nice girls who were all anxious to be friendly and work and play with her, as she had read of girls doing in the school stories which her father had given her. One of Elisaveta's chief reasons for not getting well too quickly was that when she was well, there was too little time for dreaming. There were lessons with her three governesses, who were all deeply concerned in turning out Elisaveta as a credit to her family. The Belsornian princesses had always been renowned for their learning, and it seemed to the three ladies who had charge of the latest princess that she must not fall short of the standard set by her ancestors. So Mademoiselle de Signy insisted on a great deal of French, literature, and astronomy. Signor de Basocco taught history of the world, Italian, Latin, and Greek. Miss Bruce was the very thorough over all mathematics and chemistry. Botany was taught by one of the professors from Verator University, and German and music were in charge of an old Bavarian who came to the place twice a week for his subjects. Much reading of those delightful stories which were kept in bookcases, and her sitting room was forbidden. The Princess Elisaveta led a strenuous life when she was well. Since she had begun to get better after her sharp illness, she had begun to feel a dread of the return of the old schoolroom days. It seemed to her that she could not go back to the long lesson hours and the dull days when she saw her father for a few minutes only. When 3 o'clock brought Alette, her maid, to dress her, ready to be carried to the big armchair by the fire, she felt ready to cry. However, her training held good, and she allowed Alette to put her into her pale blue velvet dressing gown with the slippers to match, and a wrap of white shawl of embroidered Indian silk round her, without making any remarks. After the nurse carried her across the room and settled her comfortably in the big armchair, in which she could almost lie at full length, the tea-table was arranged, and then Mademoiselle, who left her to the nurse and Alette lately, made her appearance. "This is better, my dear Elisabeth," she remarked as she sat down. "Now, if you will only make a little effort, I am sure you will soon be quite all right again. We shall have to work very hard once you are back in the schoolroom, you know. You make up all you have lost during your illness. I hope you have not forgotten anything." This was not very cheering conversation for the invalid, and Elisaveta simply sat silent, though she was making up her mind that she would not go near the schoolroom till she absolutely had to. She glanced at the clock. Surely her father was very late. He should have been with her quite 10 minutes ago. Suppose he could not come? Mademoiselle saw where her look went, and guessed of the cause of it. "It is only 10 minutes after the time yet," she said kindly. "His Highness would certainly have sent a message if he had been prevented from coming." Before Elisaveta could answer her, there was the sound of quick light steps along the corridor, and then the door opened and her father came in. Mademoiselle rose at once, of course. She curtsied to the prince. "Have I your permission to retire, sire?" she murmured. "Thank you, mademoiselle," replied the prince. "I will look after this bad child for a while. You must need a holiday." "Thank you, sire," replied mademoiselle, "but Elisaveta is a good girl, and I am glad she shows signs of improvement." Then she curtsied again and left the room, while Elisaveta sat literally dumb with surprise at the first part of her speech. She had not known that she was good at all, much less that mademoiselle thought so. Chapter 2. The New Plan. As soon as mademoiselle had left the room, Elisaveta turned to her father eagerly. "Daddy, what an extraordinary thing for her to say! She never praises me." She spoke in English her father loved for the sake of his long-dead mother, and which they always used when they were alone together. The thought now crossed his mind that it was as well, since she was to go to an English school. I expect she wants to encourage you to hurry up and get well," he told her laughingly. Elisabetta sighed deeply. "I don't think I want to get well, Daddy. I'd rather remain as I am." "Why?" he asked quietly. There was a moment's silence, and then out it all came, the whole of the loneliness and unhappiness that she had managed to suppress up to the date. "Daddy, it's so lonely all by myself. They all mean to be kind, but they don't know how to play, and they think I'm too big anyway. I don't want to be learned or discover stars or make wonderful translations from the Greek or anything like that. I only want to do the thing other girls do. Oh, Daddy, I want to go to school." It was out, and the secret longing of which she had never spoken to a single person once until this moment. Now she had spoken it, she suddenly wished she hadn't. It seemed so silly, and it was so impossible. The princesses of Belsornia never went to schools. The crown prince did not answer his little daughter's outburst immediately, and she began to be afraid that he minded her wanting to go away. She peeped at him from under her long lashes, and then she discovered that he was smiling. "Daddy," she cried, a suddenly wonderful idea in her head. "Well, what?" he asked. Is it?" What a number of unfinished sentences, he laughed, as he took her hands in his. "And so, that is your dream, to go to school?" Elisabetta nodded dumbly. She was incapable of speaking at the moment. "Would it make you very happy to go, Carina?" Again the little nod of the head. "Then you shall. I am going to send Signor Francesco to the Tarnzee, where there is a good school kept by an English lady, and he will make all the arrangements for you to go there after Easter. Does it please you, my darling?" "Grandpapa," breathed Elisabetta. "He agrees. He thinks with me that you will be happier with other girls at the school, with the highest testimonials, so he was consenting. Alette must see to getting your clothes ready, and I think we will give your governess a little holiday. You won't want to do lessons for the next few weeks, will you?" "Oh, it's too good to be true!" Elisabetta was squeezing her father's hand so tightly in her excitement that he was surprised. "Daddy, it's ever so good of Grandpapa. I was so afraid that he would mind. All the girls of our family have just had governesses, and I thought he would say that I must too. It is splendid that he doesn't. I suppose he's very enlightened monarch." The last sentence of that speech would have decided her father if nothing else had done so. It was so utterly unchildlike. However, he said nothing about it, and Elisabetta was too much interested in her future to worry about her grandfather, who had never shown much interest in her, and the truth being that he had never really forgiven her for being a girl. "What do we wear, Daddy? Will it be gym tunic, like the girls in the books you give me? I do hope so. It must be so lovely to wear frocks you don't have to worry about getting dirty." "Don't you like pretty frocks?" asked her father curiously. "Sometimes when I come to a reception or anything of that kind, but it's just hateful to have to be careful of them all the time." "Well, I expect you will wear a tunic, so you needn't worry about that any longer," said the prince, laughing. "Here comes Alette with the tea. Will you pour it out yourself?" "I'll pour it out," decided the princess. "You must just be my visitor, Daddy." She carefully poured out his tea and saw him supplied with a muffin from the dish Alette had brought into the room with the tea. Then she went back to the school. "Tell me all about it, Daddy, please." "I really can't tell you very much yet. I only know that the doctor told me a few things. It's built on the Tarnzees, and when your mother and I spent our honeymoon there, it was lovely. It's kept by an English girl, a Miss Bettany. She has a French lady for a partner, I believe, and she receives girls who want an English education. Dr. Tracy tells me that a friend of his just sent his little girl there, so I hope she will be a friend of yours. That's all I know about it. I have told Captain Tervolone to write for the information, and we'll know more about it when that comes. Aren't you going to eat anything? Oh, I forgot, acknowledged the princess. Oh, in her excitement, she had eaten nothing. I think I'd like a sponge cake, Daddy, please. He passed it to her, and while she ate, her thoughts went back to the grandfather. It seems so strange that I can really go, she said. I was sure that Grandpapa would always say no, so I never said anything about it. Are you certain he doesn't mind, Daddy? Certain. So you wouldn't think of that any more. Only don't talk too much about it before him, replied the prince, his mind going back to the interview he had had with his father only half an hour ago. I don't approve of the school for girls, said the king. Still, as you have reminded me, son, she is your child. So you have a right to dispose of her as you choose, I suppose. She's a girl, can never wear the crown, so I don't think it can matter much what you do with her. Send her by all means, if you feel that it is your duty. I shall not forbid it. If she had been a boy, it would have been different. As it is, I have to look forward to the fact that after you comes Cosimo. I wish you would marry again, Carlo. The crown prince shook his head. I regret, sire, I cannot do that. And Cosimo may yet reform. Never, retorted the king. Well, if you refuse, I cannot force you. I am only pointing to you your duty to the realm. But with regard to Elisabetta, you may do as you please. She will never come to the throne, and we are only a very eligible kingdom now. It can make no difference to us when she is of a marriageable age. Thank you, sire, said the prince, as he rose. I am deeply grateful to you for this consent. If I could do anything to thank you, I would do it. But what you have asked is more than I can do. The king bent his head. So be it. I may ask again, Carlo, yet I will not press you. Prince Carlo looked at his father. Then, greatly daring, he spoke once more before leaving the room. Your Majesty will be the last one to press such a thing on me, even for the good of the realm. I remember my mother. Then he had left the room to bring the glad news to his little daughter, leaving his father thinking of the lovely English wife who had taken most of the sunlight from the life when she had died. The crown prince was right. The king would never force his son to remarry, and Elisabetta had no need to present anyhow to fear a stepmother. As a matter of fact, such an idea had never entered her head. She was very childish. No one had ever hinted at such an idea to her. At least, she was very far from thinking of anything of the kind that rainy afternoon in February, when she discussed so eagerly the question of her school with her father. At about 5 o'clock by English time, 17 by continental measures, Dr. Tracy made his appearance, and was literally startled by the change in the little patient. Gone was the listlessness of the morning, and the merry, flushed child greeted him with eager exclamations. "Oh, Dr. Tracy, I'm so glad to see you. I want to thank you for saying I ought to go to school. It was too kind of you to think of a school, too." "Kind, was it?" queried the doctor as he looked at her. "Well, I don't know. It was the best thing to do when all my medication and all the nurse's cares went to no use in helping you." "You like this medicine, do you?" "Oh, ever so much," said the princess as she held out her hand. "It's lovely. I think you're dear to have thought of it." "Good. Well, If you can look like this after only a short while of it, you ought soon to be out of my hands now. You must eat and sleep and make haste to get well as soon as possible, for Alette will need you to make your new outfit, and I want to see you all ready for school before the end of next month." "Does the term begin at the end of March?" asked Elisabetta, astonished. "No, not till the beginning of May, I believe. But I want you to have a holiday first, and you must go to Elimiano for a few weeks before you take the long journey to Troll." "How lovely! I love Elimiano," sighed Elisabetta, who associated the lovely seaside village with the summer holidays spent in getting herself into as much of a mess as possible, with only Alette to raise her hands in horror, and the Baroness Salino, who was her lady-in-waiting, to say, "Oh, Princess, how you have dirtied yourself!" "Then that's settled," said the doctor. "In 3 weeks' time you will be ready for the little trip, and then it will be hay for school and dozens of girls." "Oh!" The princess sighed a deep sigh of rapture. "It's just gorgeous. I'm longing for it." "Excellent. Well, now we must have Nurse and Alette to get you back to bed and to sleep. You will be tired after all this excitement, and I don't want you to be poorly tomorrow as a result of all your joy to come." "I'll go to bed, of course," replied the princess, "but I'm sure I shall never be able to go to sleep. I shall just lie and think of it all." "We'll see," said the doctor, who knew better than to upset her by contradicting her. "I'll ring for Alette, and then you must say good night to His Highness for a while. He shall come to say good night when you are safe in bed." Nurse and Alette were settled at the improvement in their little charge since they had last seen her. Nurse especially was surprised. "Well, Princess," she said, as she laid the little girl in bed and tucked her in, "getting up has done you good. You don't look like the same child." Alette, who had been Elisabetta's nurse until her small mistress had gone into the schoolroom, and who adored the princess with her whole heart, was overjoyed. "You look more like my bambina," she said in her most soft, pretty Bellasornian. "It rejoices my heart to see you so, madame." "Dear Alette," said the princess, smiling at her. Alette finished her work of tidying up the room, and the nurse made up the fire and saw to it that the night light was in its place. "Not really sleepy, nurse?" said Elisabetta pleadingly. Nurse smiled. "Not yet, but I expect soon you will be. I will leave the light a little longer, however, and I will sit by the fire and finish my book. But you must not talk, madame. You must lie quietly if I do so." "I will," promised the princess. Elisabetta lay very still and watched her, turning over in her mind all that she had been told and all the splendid time that was coming to her. It seemed too wonderful to be true. Then she knew that it was, for she was there already, and was assuring a quite serious headmistress that she never went on a lake with the others until they had an elephant in the boat. It was just at this point, though she did not know it, that nurse lit the night light and switched off the electric light and stole out of the room. Elisabetta was sound asleep.